Hey everyone, Mr. McCarthy here. Just want to give you a heads up that I've just finished reading the section you are about to hear, and it is awesome. Best chapter yet. We learn all kinds of stuff. I think you're going to enjoy it. So sit back and enjoy. Here we go. June. That night, Thomas spends half an hour standing outside my door, trying out a dozen different kinds of apologies. He's really sorry. He didn't want me to get hurt. He didn't want me to resist Commander Jameson's orders. He didn't want me to get in trouble. He was trying to protect me. I sit on my couch with Ollie, staring off into space. I can't get the sound of those machine guns out of my head. Thomas has always been disciplined. Today was not different. He didn't hesitate, not for a second, to obey our commander. He carried out the extermination as if he were preparing for a routine plague sweep or for a night guarding an airfield. Is it worse that he followed the orders so faithfully, or that he doesn't even know that this is what I want him to apologize for? June, are you listening to me? I concentrate on scratching Ollie behind his ears. Matthias' old journals are still strewn on the coffee table, along with our parents' photo albums. You're wasting your time, I call back to him. Please, just let me in. I want to see you. I'll see you tomorrow. I won't be long, I promise. I'm really sorry. Thomas, I'll see you tomorrow. June, I raise my voice. I said I'll see you tomorrow. Silence. I wait another minute, trying to distract myself by petting Ollie. After a while, I get up and look through the peephole. The hallway's empty. When I'm finally convinced he's gone, I lie awake on the couch for another hour. My mind races from the events in the square, to Day's appearance on the rooftop, to Day's outrageous claims about the plague and the trial, and then back to Thomas. The Thomas that follows Commander Jameson's orders without question is a different Thomas from the one who's worried about my safety in the lake sector. Growing up, Thomas was awkward but always polite, especially to me. Or maybe it's me who's changed. When I tracked Day's family down and watched Thomas shoot his mother, when I looked on today as the crowd in the square was gunned down, I stood by both times and did nothing. Does that make me the same as Thomas? Are we doing the right thing by following our orders? Surely the Republic knows best. And as for what Day told me, my temper rises at the thought of it. My father had worked behind those double doors. Matthias had mentored under Sheehan in overseeing the trials. Why would we poison and kill our own people? I sigh, sit up, and grab one of Matthias's journals off the coffee table. This one is about an exhausting week of cleanup duty after Hurricane Elijah tore through Los Angeles. Another spells out his first week in Commander Jameson's patrol. A third one is short, only a paragraph long, and complains about working 2 night shifts in a row. This makes me smile. I can still remember his words. I can barely stay awake, Matthias had told me after his first night shift. Does she honestly think we can guard anything after pulling an all-nighter? I was so out of it today that the colony's chancellor himself could have walked into Batalla Hall and I wouldn't have known it. I feel a tear on my cheek and quickly wipe it away. Ollie whines next to me. I reach out and let my hand sink into the thick white fur around his neck, and he drops his head into my lap with a sigh. Matthias has fretted over such small things. My eyes grow heavy as I continue to read. The words start to blur together on the page until I can't quite understand what each entry means anymore. Finally, I put the journal aside and drift off into sleep. Day appears in my dreams. He holds my hands in his own, and my heart pounds at the touch. His hair falls around his shoulders like a silk drape, one streak of it scarlet with blood, and his eyes look pained. I didn't kill your brother. He pulls me close. I promise you, I couldn't have. When I wake up, I lie still for a while and let Day's words run through my head. My eyes wander over to the computer desk. How had that fateful night played out? If Day hit Matthias' shoulder, then how did the knife end up in my brother's chest? This brief thought makes my heart ache. I look at Ollie. Who would want to hurt Matthias? I ask him. Ollie looks back at me with mournful eyes. And why? I push myself off the couch several minutes later, then wander over to my desk and turn on my computer. I go back to the crime report from the Central Hospital. 4 pages of text, 1 page of photos. It's the photos that I decided to take a closer look at. After all, Commander Jameson had given me only a few minutes to analyze Matthias' body, and I'd used the time poorly. But how could I have concentrated? I'd never doubted that the murderer was anyone but Day. I hadn't studied the photos as closely as I should have. Now, I double-click on the first photos and enlarge them to full screen. The sight makes me lightheaded. Matthias's cold, lifeless face tilts up to the sky, and his hair fans out in a small circle under his head. Blood stains his shirt. I take a deep breath, close my eyes, and tell myself to concentrate this time. I'd always managed to get through reading the text of the report, but I could never bring myself to study the photos. Now I have to. I open my eyes and focus back on my brother's body. I wish I had studied the wounds more closely in person when I had the chance. First, I make sure the knife in the photo was indeed buried in his chest. Bits of blood stain the hilt. I can't see any of the blade. Then I look at Matthias's shoulder. Although it's covered up by his sleeve, I can see that a sizable circle of blood stains the cloth there. It couldn't be spillover from the chest. There must be another wound. I enlarge the photo again. Nope, too blurry. Even if there is a knife-like slice in the sleeve over his shoulder, I can't see it at this angle. I close the photo and click on another one. That's when I realize something. All the photos on this page are taken at an angle. I can barely make out the details of his shoulder and even on the knife. I frown. Poor crime scene photography. Why weren't there close-ups? Weren't there close-up photos of the actual wounds? I scroll through the report again, searching for pages I might have missed. But that was it. I go back to the same page and then try to make sense of it. Maybe the other photos are classified. What if Commander Jameson took them out to spare me the pain? I shake my head. No, that's stupid. Then she wouldn't have sent me any photos with this report at all. I stare at the screen, then dare to imagine the alternative. What if Commander Jameson took them out to hide something from me? No. I sit back and stare at the first photo again. Why would Commander Jameson want to hide the details of my brother's murder from me? She loves her soldiers. She was outraged by Matthias's death. She even arranged for his funeral. She wanted him on her patrol. She was the one who made him captain. But I doubt the crime scene photographer was so rushed that he would take such a bad set of photos. I think about it from several angles, but keep coming to the same conclusion. This report is incomplete. I run a hand through my hair in frustration. I don't understand it. Suddenly, I look closer at the knife in the photo. It's grainy, and the details are almost impossible to make out, but something triggers an old memory that makes my stomach churn. The blood on the knife's hilt is dark, but there's another mark there too, something darker than the blood. At first, I think it's part of the faint pattern on the knife, but these marks are on top of the blood. They look black, thick, and textured. I try to remember what the knife looked like on the night it happened, when I had a chance to look at it myself. These black marks look like rifle grease, almost like the streak of grease that was on Thomas's forehead when I first saw him that night. Day. When June visits me again the next morning, even she looks shocked, if for just a second, at my figure, slumped against one wall of my cell. I tilt my head in her direction. She hesitates at the sight of me, but quickly regains her composure. I assume you made someone angry, she says, then snaps her fingers at the soldiers. Everyone out. I want a private word with the prisoner. She nods up at the security cameras positioned in each corner. And cut those too. The soldier in charge salutes. Yes, ma'am. As several of them hurry to click off the cameras, I see her take out the 2 knives sheathed at her belt. Somehow, I must have made her angry too. A laugh bubbles out of my throat and turns into a coughing fit. Well, I guess we should just get it all out of the way. When the soldiers leave and the door slams shut behind June, she walks over and crouches beside me. I brace myself for the feeling of a blade against my skin. Day. She hasn't moved. Instead, she puts her knives back by her belt and pulls out a canteen of water. Just a display for the soldiers, I guess. She splashes some of the cool liquid on my face. I flinch, but then I open my mouth to catch some of it. Water never tasted so good. June squirts some water directly into my mouth, then puts the canteen away. Your face looks awful. There's concern, and something else in her expression. Who did this to you? Nice of you to ask. I'm amazed she even cares. You can thank your captain friend for this. Thomas? That's the guy. I don't think he's very happy that I got a kiss from you and he hasn't. So he interrogated me about the Patriots. Apparently Cade's a Patriot. Small world, huh? Anger flashes across June's face. He never mentioned this to me. Last night well, I'll take it up with Commander Jameson. Thanks. I blink water out of my eyes. I was wondering when you'd come. I hesitate for a second. Do you know anything about Tess yet? If she's alive? June looks down. Sorry, she replies. I have no way of knowing where she is. She should be safe as long as she stays low. I haven't mentioned her to anyone. She hasn't appeared in any of the recent arrests or deaths. I'm frustrated by the lack of news, but relieved at the same time. How are my brothers? June tightens her lips. I have no access to Eden, although I'm sure he's still alive. John is doing as well as can be expected. When she looks up again, I see confusion and sadness in her eyes. I'm sorry you had to deal with Thomas yesterday. Thanks, I guess, I whisper. Is there any particular reason why you're nicer than usual today? I don't expect June to take this question seriously, but she does. She stares at me, then seats herself in front of me with her legs folded underneath her. She seems different today. Subdued, maybe. Even sad. Uncertain. An expression I've never seen before, even when I first met her on the streets. Something bothering you? June stays silent a while longer, her eyes cast down, while finally she looks at me. She's searching for something, I realize. Is she trying to find a way to trust me? I studied my brother's crime scene report again last night. Her voice trickles to a whisper so that I have to lean forward to hear her. And? I say. June's eyes search mine. She hesitates again. Day, can you say, honestly and truly, that you didn't kill Matthias? She must have found something. She wants a confession. The night at the hospital flashes through my thoughts. My disguise, Matthias watching me as I entered the hospital, the young doctor I'd held hostage, the bullets bouncing off the refrigerators, my long fall to the ground, then the face-off with Matthias, the way I'd thrown my knife at him. I'd seen it hit his shoulder, so far from his chest that it couldn't possibly have killed him. I hold June's gaze with my own. I did not kill your brother. I reach out to touch her hand and wince at the pain that shoots up my arm. I don't know who did. I'm sorry for injuring him at all, but I had to save my own life. I wish I'd had more time to think it through. June nods quietly. The look on her face is so heartbreaking that I wish for a second that I could hold her. Someone needs to hold her. I really miss him, she whispers. I thought he would be around for a long time, Someone I could always lean on. He was all I had left. And now he's gone, and I wish I knew why. She shakes her head slowly as if defeated, and then lets her eyes meet mine again. Her sadness makes her impossibly beautiful, like snow blanketing a barren landscape. And I don't know why. That's the worst part, Day. I don't know why he died. Why would someone want him dead? Her words are so similar to my thoughts about my mother that I can barely breathe. I didn't know that June had lost her parents, although I should have guessed it from the way she carries herself. June was the one who shot my mother. She was not the one who shot my mother. She was not the one who brought the plague into my home. She was a girl who'd lost her brother, and someone who had led her to believe I did it. And in anguish, she had tracked me down. If I'd been in her place, would I have done anything differently? She's crying now. I give her a small smile, then sit up straighter and stretch my hand out toward her face. The shackles on my wrist clank together. I wipe away the tears from one of her eyes. Neither of us says anything. No need to. She's thinking, if I'm right about her brother, then what else am I right about? After a moment, June takes my hand and holds it against her cheek. Her touch sends warmth coursing through me. She's so lovely. I ache to pull her to me now and press my lips against hers and wash away the sorrow in her eyes. I wish I could go back to that night in the alley for just 1 second. I'm the first one to speak. You and I may have the same enemy, I say. and they've pitted us against each other. June takes a deep breath. I'm not sure yet, she says, even though I can tell by her voice that she agrees with me. It's dangerous for us to talk like this. She looks away, reaches into her cloak, and pulls out something I thought I'd lost at the hospital. Here, I want to give this back to you. I have no more use for it. I want to snatch it from her hand, but the chains weigh me down. In her palm is my pendant necklace, the smooth bumps of its surface, scraped and dirty, but still more or less whole, the necklace part lying in a pile in her palm. You had it? I whisper. You found it at the hospital that night, didn't you? That's how you recognized me when you finally found me. I must have reached for it. June nods quietly, then takes my hand and drops the pendant into my palm. I look at it in wonder. My father. I can't keep the memory of him away now that I'm staring at my pendant again. I think back to the day he visited us after 6 months without a word, when he was safely inside and we draped curtains over the windows. He wrapped his arms around Mom and kissed her for such a long time. He kept one hand pressed protectively on her stomach. John waited patiently to greet him, hands in his pockets. I was still young enough to hug his leg. Eden wasn't born yet. He was still inside Mom's growing belly. How are my boys? My father said, after he finally let go of Mom. He patted my cheek and smiled at John. John gave him a big, toothy grin. He had managed to grow his hair long enough to tie it back in a tail. He held up a certificate. Look, he said, I passed my trial. You did. My father clapped John on the back and shook his hand as if he were a man. I can still remember the relief in his eyes, the tremor of joy in his words. Back then, we all worried that John would be the one to fail the trial, considering his trouble with reading. I'm proud of you, Johnny. Good job. Then he looked at me. I remember studying his face. Dad's official job in the Republic was to clean up after the war front soldiers, of course, but there were always hints that this wasn't the only job he had. Hints like the stories he sometimes told about the colonies and their glittering cities, their advanced technology and festive holidays. At that moment, I wanted to ask him why he was always gone even after his war front rotation should have returned him home, why he never came to see us. But something else distracted me. There's something in your vest pocket, Dad, I said. Sure enough, a circular bump was pressed against the cloth. He chuckled, then took out the object. So there is, Daniel. He glanced up at our mother. He's very perceptive, isn't he? Mom smiled at me. My father hesitated, then ushered us into the bedroom. Grace, he said to Mom, look what I found. She studied it closely. What is it? It's more proof. At first my father tried to show it only to Mom, but managed to get a good look as he turned it over in his hands. A bird on one side, a man's profile on the other. United States of America, In God We Trust, $quarter, embossed on one side, and Liberty and 1990 on the other. See? Evidence. He pressed it into her palm. Where did you find this? Mom asked. In the southern swamplands between the two war fronts. It's a genuine coin from 1990. See the name? United States? It was real. My mother's eyes gleamed with excitement, but she still gave Dad a grave look. This is a dangerous thing to own, she whispered. We're not keeping this in our house. My father nodded. But we can't destroy it. We have to safeguard it. For all we know, this might be the last coin of its kind in the world. He folded my mother's fingers over the coin. I'll make a metal casing for it, something that covers both sides. I'll weld it shut so the coin's secure inside. What will we do with it? Hide it somewhere. My father paused for a second, then looked at John and me. Best place might be somewhere obvious to everyone. Give it to one of the boys, maybe as a locket. People will think it's just a child's ornament. But if soldiers find it in the house in a raid, hidden under some floorboard, they'll know for sure it's important. I stayed silent. Even at that age, I understood my father's concern. Our house had been searched on routine inspections by troops before, just like every other house on our street. If Dad hid it somewhere, they'd find it. Our father left early the next morning, before the sun even rose. We would see him only one more time after that. Then, he never came home again. This memory flashes through my mind in an instant. I look up at June. Thank you for finding this. I wonder if she can hear the sadness in my voice. Thank you for giving it back to me. June. I can't stop thinking about Day. When I lie down in my apartment for a brief rest later that afternoon, I dream of him. I dream that Day has his arms wrapped around me and is kissing me again and again, his hands running up my arms and through my hair and around my waist, his chest pressed against mine, his breath against my cheeks and neck and ears. His long hair brushes against me, and his eyes drown me with their depths. When I wake up and find myself alone again, I can hardly breathe. His words run through my mind until I can't even understand them anymore. That someone else has killed Matthias. That the Republic is intentionally spreading the plague in the poor sections. I think back to how we were on the streets of Lake when he would risk his safety because I needed to rest. Then today, wiping the tears from my cheek. I can't find the anger I used to have toward him. And if I discover proof that someone else killed Matthias, for whatever reason, then I have no reason to hate him at all. I'd once been fascinated by his legend, all the stories I'd heard before I met him. Now, I can feel that same sense of fascination returning. I picture his face, so beautiful, even after pain and torture and grief, his blue eyes bright and sincere. I'm ashamed to admit that I enjoyed my brief time with him in his prison cell. His voice can make me forget about all the details running through my mind, bringing with it emotions of desire or fear instead, sometimes even anger, but always triggering something that wasn't there before. 1912 hours, Tangashi sector, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. I heard you had a private conversation with Day this afternoon, Thomas says to me as we sit together, eating bowls of edamame at a cafe. The cafe is the same one that we visited when Matthias was alive. Thomas's choice of location doesn't ease my thoughts. I can't forget the rifle grease smeared on the hilt of the knife that killed my brother. Maybe he's testing me. Maybe he knows what I suspect. I take a bite of pork so I don't have to answer. I'm glad that the two of us are sitting a good distance apart. Thomas has spent a great deal of effort convincing me to forgive him, to let him take me out to dinner. Why did he do this? I can't be sure. To draw me out? To get me to say something by accident? To see if I would refuse and then take this information to Commander Jameson? It doesn't take much evidence to start an investigation against someone. Maybe this whole evening is just bait. But then again, maybe he's really trying to make up with me. I don't know. So I tread carefully. Thomas watches me eat. What did you say to him? There's jealousy in his voice. My words come out cool and detached. Don't bother, Thomas. I reach out and touch his arm to distract him. If a boy killed someone you loved, wouldn't you keep trying to figure out why he'd done it? I thought he might talk to me if the guards weren't around. But I've given up on him. I'll be happier when he's dead. Thomas relaxes a little, but he still studies my face. Maybe you should stop seeing him, he suggests after another long silence. It doesn't seem to be helping you. I can ask Commander Jameson to send someone else to give Day his water rations. I hate to think of you having to interact so much with your brother's murderer. I nod in agreement and take another bit of the edamame. To stay silent now would look bad. What if I'm eating dinner with my brother's murderer? Logic. Caution and logic. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Thomas's hands. What if those are the hands that stabbed Matthias straight through the heart? You're right, I say, without missing a beat. I make myself sound grateful, thoughtful. I haven't gotten anything useful out of him yet. He'll be dead soon anyway. Thomas shrugs. I'm glad you think so. He drops 50 notes on our table as the waiter comes by. Day is just a criminal on death row. His word shouldn't matter to a girl of your standing. I take another bite before answering. They don't, I reply. I might as well be talking to a dog. But to myself, I think, Day's words will matter if he's telling the truth. Long after Thomas has escorted me back to my apartment and left, and long after midnight has passed, I sit awake at my computer and study Matthias's crime report. I've looked at the photos enough times now to keep myself from turning away, but it still leaves a queasy feeling in my stomach. Every photo is taken from an angle facing away from his wounds. The longer I stare at the black smears on the knife hilt, the more convinced I am that they're remnants of rifle grease. When I can't look at the photos any longer, I go back to the couch and sift through Matthias's journals again. If my brother had any other enemies, I'm sure there'd be a clue somewhere in his writing. But he was no fool either. He never would have written down anything that could be used as evidence. I read through pages and pages of his old entries, all of them about irrelevant, mundane things. Sometimes he talks about us. These I have more trouble reading. One journal entry talks about the night of his induction ceremony into the Commander Jameson's squad, when I'd fallen ill. Another is about the celebration we had together when I scored a 1,500 on my trial. We placed an order for ice cream and 2 whole chickens, and at one point in the evening, I even experimented with making a chicken and ice cream sandwich, which maybe wasn't the best idea I've ever had. I can still hear us laughing, still smell the warm aromas of baked chicken and fresh bread. I press my fists against my closed eyes and take a deep breath. "What am I doing?" I whisper to Ollie, who tilts his head at me from where he's lying on the couch. "I'm befriending a criminal and pushing away people I've known my entire life." Ollie looks back at me with that universal dog wisdom, then promptly goes back to sleep. I stare at him for a while. Not long ago, Matthias would have dozed there with his arm draped around Ollie's back. I wonder if Ollie's imagining that now. It takes me a moment to realize something. I open my eyes, then look back at the last page I'd read in Matthias's journal. I think I saw something there. I narrow my eyes at the bottom of the page. A misspelled word. I frown. "That's odd," I say out loud. The word is refrigerator, spelled with an extra D. Refrigerator. Never in my life had I known Matthias to misspell anything. I study it for a second longer, shake my head, and decide to move on. I make a mental note of the page. 10 minutes later, I find another one. This time the word is elevation, but Matthias spells it elevation. Elevatien. 2 misspelled words. My brother would never have done this by accident. I look around as if there might be a surveillance camera in the room. Then I lean toward the coffee table and start sifting through all the pages of Matthias's journals. I store the misspelled words in my head. No reason to write them down for someone else to find. I find a third word, bourgeoisie, spelled Bowrgeoisie. Then a fourth one, emanating, spelled Emamating. My heart starts to pound. By the time I finish going through all 12 of Matthias's journals, I've uncovered 24 misspelled words. All of them come from the journals written in the last few months. I lean back on the couch, then close my eyes so I can picture the words in my mind. That many misspelled words from Matthias can be nothing other than a message to me, the one person who is most likely to go through his writing, a secret code. This must be why he'd pulled all the boxes out of the closet that fateful afternoon. This might be the one important thing he wanted to talk to me about. I shift the words around, trying to form a sentence that makes sense, and when that fails, I move the letters around to see if each one might be an anagram for something else. No, nothing. I rub my temples. Then I try something else. What if Matthias wanted me to put together the individual letters that are either missing from each word or in the word when they aren't supposed to be there? I quietly make the list of these letters in my head, starting with the D in refrigerator. DLWGWUNOWMJWUTCEELOFOOMB. I frown. Makes no sense. I scramble the letters over and over again in my head, trying to come up with various combinations of words. When I was little, Matthias played word games with us. He'd throw a bunch of letter blocks on the table and ask me what words I could form with them. Now, I try playing this game again. I play it for a while before I stumble across a combination that makes me open my eyes. Junebug. Matthias's nickname for me. I swallow hard and try to stay calm. Slowly, I line up the leftover letters and try to form words with them. Combinations fly through my mind until one of them makes me pause. Follow me, Junebug. The only words left after that are 3 W's, then CTOOMD, which left one logical option. www.followmejunebug.com, a website. I run the letters through my mind several more times to make sure that my assumption is correct. Then I glance at my computer. First, I type in Matthias's hack that allows me to access the internet. I put up the defenses and shells that my brother taught me. There are eyes everywhere online. Then I disable my browser's history and type in the URL with trembling fingers. A white page pops up. Only one line of text appears at the top. Let me take your hand, and I will give you mine. I know exactly what Matthias wants me to do. Without hesitating, I reach a hand out and press it flat against my monitor. At first, nothing happens. Then I hear a click, see a faint light scan across my skin, and the white page disappears. In its place appears what looks to be a blog. My breath catches in my throat. There are 6 brief entries here. I lean forward in my chair and start reading. What I see makes me dizzy with horror. July 12th. This is for June's eyes only. June, you can easily delete all traces of this blog at any time by pressing your right palm against the screen and typing Ctrl-Shift-SF. I have no other place to write this, so I'll write it here, for you. Yesterday was your 15th birthday. I wish you were older, though, because I can't quite bring myself to tell a 15-year-old girl what I have found, especially when you should be celebrating. Today, I found a photograph taken by our late father. It was the very last one in the very last photo album they owned, and I'd never noticed it before because Dad had hidden it behind a larger photo. You know, I flip through our parents' pictures all the time. I like reading their little notes. Feels like they can still talk to me. But this time, I noticed that the last photo in that album felt unusually thick. When I fiddled with it, the secret photo fell out. Dad had taken a photo of his workplace, the lab in Batalla Hall. Dad never talked to us about his work, yet he'd taken this photo. It was blurry and oversaturated, but I could make out the shape of a young man on a gurney pleading for his life with a bright red biohazard sign printed on his hospital gown. Do you know what Dad wrote at the bottom of that photo? Resigning, April 6th. Our father had tried to resign the day before he and Mom were killed in a car wreck. September 15th. I've been trying to find clues for weeks, still nothing. Who knew the deceased civilian database was so difficult to hack? But I'm not giving up yet. There's something behind our parents' death, and I'm going to find out what it is. November 17th. You asked me why I seem so out of it today. June, if you're reading this, you probably remember this day, and now you'll know why. I've been hunting for clues ever since my last entry here. For the past few months, I've tried asking subtle questions of other lab workers and of Dad's old friends and searching online. Well, today, I found something. Today, I managed to hack the Los Angeles deceased civilians database. Most complicated thing I've ever done. I was going about it the wrong way. There's a security hole on their servers that I hadn't noticed before because they'd buried it in all sorts of... Well, anyway, it resulted in me getting in. And much to my surprise, I actually found a report on our parents' car accident. Except, it was not an accident, June. I'll never be able to say this to you out loud, so I desperately hope that you'll see it here. Commander Baccarin, another former student of Chian, you remember Chian, right? Submitted the report. The report said that Dr. Michael Iparis had roused the suspicions of the Batalla Hall lab administrators when he first questioned the true purpose of his research. He'd always worked on understanding the plague viruses, of course, but he must have uncovered something that upset him enough to make him quietly file for a change in work assignment. Remember that, June? It was just a few weeks before the car crash. The rest of the report didn't go into the plagues, but it told me what I needed to know. June, the Batalla Hall lab administrators ordered Commander Baccarin to keep an eye on our father. When Dad tried to get reassigned, Baccarin knew that he'd figured out the reason for his research. As you can imagine, this didn't go over very well. Commander Baccarin was ordered to find a way to smooth the whole matter over. The report ends by saying that the matter was resolved without military casualties. Dated a day after the car accident. They killed him. November 18th. They fixed the security hole on the server. I'll have to find another way around it. November 22nd. Turns out that the deceased civilians database has more information about the plagues than I guessed. Of course, I should have known that, what with the plagues killing off hundreds of people every year, but I always thought the plagues were spontaneous. They're not. Junebug, you need to know this. I don't know when you'll find these entries, but I know you'll find them eventually. Listen to me carefully. When you are finished reading, don't tell me you know about anything. I don't want you doing something rash. Understand? Think about your safety first. You can find a way to help. I know you can. If anyone can, you can. But for my sake, don't do anything that'll draw attention to you. I'll kill myself if the Republic strikes you down for reacting to knowledge that I gave you. If you want to rebel, rebel from inside the system. That's much more powerful than rebelling outside the system. And if you choose to rebel, bring me with you. Dad found out that the Republic engineers the annual plagues. They start off in the most obvious place. Those high-rise terraces full of grazing animals isn't where most of our meat comes from. Did you know that? I should have guessed it. The Republic has thousands of underground factories for the animals. They're hundreds of feet deep. At first, Congress didn't know what to do with the crazy viruses that kept developing down there and killing off entire factories of animals. Inconvenient, right? But then they remembered the colonies war. So every time an interesting new virus appears in the meat factories, the scientists take samples and craft them into viruses that can infect humans. Then they develop an equivalent vaccine and cure for it. And then they hand out mandatory vaccinations to everyone but a few slum sectors. Rumor has it that there's a new strain developing in Lake and Alta and Winter. They pump that virus into the slum sectors through a system of underground pipes. Sometimes into the water supply, sometimes just directly into a few specific homes to see how it spreads. That starts off a new round of plague. When they think they've seen enough evidence for what that virus strain can do, they secretly prick everyone still alive that is, in those sectors with the cure during a routine sweep, and the plague dies down until the next test strain. They also run individual plague experiments on some of the children who fail the trial. They don't go to labor camps, June. None of them do. They die. Do you see where I'm going with this? They use the plagues to cull the population of weak genes, the same way the trials pick out the strongest. But they're also creating viruses to use against the colonies. They've been using biological weapons against them for years. I don't give a damn what happens to the colonies or exactly what our republic wants to inflict on them. But June, our own people are lab rats. Dad worked in those labs, and when he tried to quit, they killed him. And Mom. They thought they would tell everybody. Who wants a mass riot? Certainly not Congress. We're all going to die like this, June, if someone doesn't step in. One of these days, the virus will get out of hand, and no vaccine or cure will be able to stop it. November 26th. Thomas knows. He knows what I suspect, that I think the government may have killed our parents intentionally. I keep wondering how he knew that I'd hacked into the deceased civilians' database, and all I can think of is that I left a trace, and the tech guys who fixed that security hole found it and mentioned it to him. So he approached me earlier today and asked me about it. I told him I was still grieving over our parents' deaths and got a little paranoid. Told him I didn't find anything. I said you knew nothing about it, that he shouldn't mention it to you. He said he'd keep it a secret. I think I can trust him. It's just a little nerve-wracking to have anyone know even the smallest bit about my suspicions. I mean, you know how we get sometimes. I've made up my mind. By the end of the week, I'll tell Commander Jameson that I'm going to withdraw from her patrol. I'll complain about the hours and Say that I don't see you enough. Something like that. I'll update here when I'm reassigned. I follow Matthias's instructions and delete every last trace of his blog. Then I curl up on the couch and sleep until Thomas calls. I press the button on my phone and the voice of my brother's murderer fills my living room. Thomas, the soldier who would happily carry out any order from Commander Jameson, even if it's to kill a childhood friend. The soldier who used Day as a convenient scapegoat. "June," he says, "are you all right? It's almost 1000 hours, and I haven't seen you. Commander Jameson wants to know where you are." "I'm not feeling well," I manage. "I'm going to sleep a while longer." "Oh," a pause. "What are your symptoms?" "I'll be fine," I reply. "Just dehydrated and feverish. I think I ate something bad last night at the cafe. Tell Commander Jameson I should feel a little better by evening." "Okay, then. Sorry to hear it. Feel better soon." Another pause. "If you're still feeling sick by tonight, I'll follow a report and send the plague patrol over to check you. Protocol. If you need me to come over, just call me." "You're the last person I want to see." "I'll let you know. Thanks." I hang up. My head hurts. Too many memories. Too many revelations. No wonder Commander Jameson had Matthias's body taken away so fast. I'd been stupid enough to think she did it out of sympathy. No wonder she organized his funeral. Even my test mission to track Day must have been a diversion to distract me while they tossed out any remaining evidence. I think back to the evening when Matthias decided to resign from shadowing Chien and joining the trial enforcers. He'd been quiet and withdrawn when he picked me up from school. "Are you all right?" I remember asking him. He didn't answer. He just took my hand in his and headed for the train station. "Come on, June," he said. "Let's just go home." When I looked at his gloves, I saw tiny specks of blood staining them. Matthias didn't touch his dinner or ask me how my day went, which annoyed me until I realized just how upset he was. Finally, right before bedtime, I went over to where he was lying on the couch and snuggled under his arm. He kissed my forehead. "I love you," I whispered, hoping to get something out of him. He turned to look at me. His eyes were so sad. "June," he said, "I think I'm going to appeal for a different mentor tomorrow." "You don't like Chien?" Matthias stayed silent for a while. Then he lowered his eyes as if ashamed. "I shot someone at the trial stadium today." This was what bothered him. I kept quiet and let him go on. Matthias ran a hand through his hair. "I shot a girl. She'd failed her trial and tried to escape the stadium. Chien screamed at me to shoot her, and I listened." "Oh, I didn't know it back then, but now I can tell that Matthias felt like he had shot me when he killed that little girl." "I'm sorry," I whispered. Matthias stared off into the distance. "Few people ever kill for the right reasons, June," he said after a long silence. "Most do it for the wrong reasons. I just hope you never have to be in either category." The memory fades, and I'm left hanging on to the ghosts of his words. I don't move for the next few hours. When the Republic's pledge starts up outside, I can hear the people on the streets below chanting along, but I don't bother to stand. I don't salute when the Elector Primo's name comes up. Ollie sits next to me, staring, whining every now and then. I look back at him. I'm thinking, calculating. I have to do something. I think of Matthias, of my parents, then of Day's mother and his brothers. The plague has gotten its claws around all of us in one way or another. The plague murdered my parents. The plague infected Day's brother. It killed Matthias for uncovering the truth of it all. It took from me the people I love. And behind the plague is the Republic itself, the country I used to be proud of, the country that experiments on and kills children who fail the trial. Labor camps. We'd all been fooled. Had the Republic murdered relatives of my Drake classmates too? All those people who died in combat or in accidents or of illness? What else is secret? I rise, walk over to my computer, and pick up my glass of water. I stare blankly into it. Somehow, the sight of my fingers' disjointed reflections against this glass startles me, Reminds me of Day's bloody hands, of Matthias's broken body. This antique glass was a gift, supposedly imported from the Republic's islands of South America. It's worth 2,150 notes. Someone could have bought a plague cure with the money spent on this glass that I used to drink water out of. Maybe the Republic doesn't even own those islands. Maybe nothing I've been taught is true. In a sudden fit of anger, I lift the glass and hurl it against the wall. It shatters into 1,000 glittering pieces. I stand there, unmoving, trembling. If Matthias and Day had met somewhere other than the hospital's back streets, would they have become allies? The sun changes positions. Afternoon comes. I still don't want to move from where I stand. Finally, when the sunset bathes my apartment in orange and gold, I break out of my trance. I clean up the shining shards of broken glass. I dress in my full uniform. I make sure my hair is pulled back flawlessly, that my face is clean and calm and devoid of emotion. In the mirror, I look the same. But I am a different person inside. I am a prodigy who knows the truth, and I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to help Day escape.